What happens when a billionaire ignores a waitress's warning and she saves his life 30 seconds later? Emma Martinez spent 3 years serving champagne at Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, invisible to men like Marcus Harrison. The real estate mogul never knew the woman pouring his wine was once the top trauma surgeon who refused his $500,000 bribe. Tonight, when Harrison's throat closed from anaphylactic shock after dismissing her warning, Emma faced an impossible choice. Let karma take its course, or save the man who destroyed her career and killed her brother. This is the story of how 30 seconds changed everything. Stay until the end, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. And if you like it, please hit the like button. The crystal chandeliers of the Vermilion Rose cast fractured light across white tablecloths, each beam reflecting off silverware arranged with surgical precision. Emma Martinez moved through the dining room like a ghost, her black uniform pressed crisp, her dark hair pulled back so tight it made her temples ache. 3 years she'd worked here. 3 years of being invisible. She preferred it that way. Her fingers brushed against the medical alert bracelet on her left wrist, a nervous habit she'd never broken. The metal was warm from her skin, the engraving on the back worn smooth from countless touches. Jake Martinez, type O+, in case of emergency. There would never be another emergency for Jake. Not anymore. Table 7 needs water, Marco, the head waiter, whispered as he passed. And check the Richards party. They're getting impatient. Emma nodded, reaching for a crystal pitcher. The weight was familiar, comforting even. Everything here was about weight and balance. Carrying trays, managing expectations, staying upright when your entire world had collapsed 3 years ago. The restaurant hummed with the particular frequency of old money. Hushed conversations, the soft clink of forks against porcelain, the rustle of silk and wool. She'd learned to read the room by sound alone. Table 3, anniversary, based on the champagne order. Table 9, business dinner, probably struggling, given how long they'd been nursing the same bottle. Table 12, her hand went still on the pitcher handle. Table 12 was being prepared. The reserved sign removed, fresh roses placed in the center, the chair angles adjusted to mathematical perfection. She knew what that meant. He was coming. Emma, Charles, the restaurant manager, appeared at her elbow. His cologne, something expensive and vaguely cedar-scented, arrived before he did. Mr. Harrison has a party of 4 tonight. 8:15, private dining room. Her jaw tightened imperceptibly. Understood. And Emma? Charles lowered his voice. I shouldn't have to remind you, but Mr. Harrison prefers invisible staff. I know. The words came out flatter than she intended. Charles studied her for a moment, his expression softening. He was one of the few people here who'd known her before. Before the Vermilion Rose. Before the uniforms and the silence and the careful erasure of Dr. Emma Martinez from every database that mattered. You okay? He asked quietly. She forced her fingers away from Jake's bracelet. Always am. The lie tasted familiar. Emma spent the next hour in mechanical motion, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, smiling with just her mouth, never her eyes. She'd perfected the service smile, pleasant enough to be professional, forgettable enough to remain invisible. The trick was to make yourself into furniture, useful, necessary, silent. In the kitchen, she paused by the expediting station, watching Chef Laurent plate a Dover sole with tweezers and the focus of a jeweler. The smell of butter and wine and fresh herbs wrapped around her. Scents that should have been comforting but instead reminded her of everything she'd lost. She used to have that same focus, that same steady hand, that same ability to make life or death decisions in the space between heartbeats. Her phone buzzed in her locker. She ignored it. Probably her mother again, asking if she'd reconsidered medical school applications, as if Emma could just walk back into an operating room after Martinez! Marco's voice cut through the kitchen noise. Harrison party arriving. You're on water and wine. Do not engage unless directly addressed. Got it. She smoothed her apron, checked her reflection in the stainless steel cooler door. The woman looking back was unrecognizable from the one who'd worn scrubs and a white coat. This woman had haunted eyes and careful posture, and hands that shook sometimes when she thought no one was watching. This woman was no one. Emma pushed through the swinging door into the private dining room, old dark wood paneling and oil paintings of horses, and began setting up the water station. Through the frosted glass, she could see the main dining room, could see the entrance, could see... The front door opened. Marcus Harrison walked in like he owned the building. He probably did. The man owned half of Manhattan, his real estate empire built on luxury developments and ruthless business practices. His suit was Brioni. She'd learned to recognize the cut, the way the fabric moved like liquid. His hair, silver at the temples, was styled with the kind of casual perfection that cost $500 every 2 weeks. He'd aged well in 3 years. Money did that. Emma's hand found Jake's bracelet again. Her brother had been 22 when Harrison's drunk driver ran a red light on Lexington Avenue. 22, with a college degree and a job offer and a whole life that ended in twisted metal and shattered glass. Harrison had tried to make it disappear. Tried to make Emma disappear when she wouldn't help him. He'd succeeded. Ms. Martinez. Charles appeared beside her, his voice barely audible. Mr. Harrison is particular about the temperature of his water. Room temperature, no ice, and he doesn't like to be kept waiting. Understood, she said again, the word becoming her mantra. Through the glass, she watched Harrison greet 3 people, 2 men and a woman, all dressed in the international uniform of extreme wealth. They moved toward the private dining room, toward her, and Emma did what she'd trained herself to do. She became no one. The door opened. Harrison entered first, not bothering to hold it for the others. His eyes swept the room, cataloging details with the assessment of a man who measured everything by value. His gaze passed over Emma without pausing, without recognition, without any indication he saw a human being at all. "The table is acceptable," he announced to Charles. Not a thank you, not a question, a verdict. Emma poured water into 4 glasses, her movements economical and quiet. She could feel Harrison 20 feet away, could smell his cologne, something sharp and woody and expensive enough to cost more than her monthly rent. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands stayed steady. Surgeon's hands, even if she wasn't allowed to use them anymore. "Emma will be attending to your table this evening," Charles said, gesturing vaguely in her direction without actually looking at her. The art of making staff simultaneously present and invisible. Harrison didn't acknowledge the introduction. He was already pulling out his chair, already dismissing her existence. To him, she was what she'd always been, just a waitress, just a uniform, just a person who existed to serve and then disappear. He had no idea who she was. Emma set the water glass at his place setting, the crystal catching light from the chandelier overhead. For just a moment, she let herself look at him, really look at him. The small scar over his left eyebrow, the way his jaw clenched when he was irritated, the complete absence of guilt in his expression. This was the man who'd destroyed her life. This was the man she served water to 3 nights a week. This was the man who'd never once looked at her long enough to recognize the doctor he'd framed for medical malpractice and drug trafficking. The doctor who'd lost her medical license, her savings, her career, and finally, her will to fight. Harrison reached for his phone, already ignoring the room, ignoring his guests, ignoring Emma as she finished setting the table. She stepped back toward the wall, hands folded, eyes downcast, everything about her posture screaming invisible, forgettable, harmless. The other guests settled in. The woman, Asian, early 40s, designer everything, pulled out a tablet. One of the men, European accent, German maybe, adjusted his glasses and opened a leather portfolio. The third man wore traditional Gulf Arab dress, his keffiyeh held in place with a gold agal. This wasn't just dinner. This was business. Big business, based on the tension in the room. "Gentlemen, Ms. Chen," Harrison began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Thank you for flying in. I trust your accommodations were satisfactory." Emma moved to the corner, ready to refill water, to open wine, to exist only when needed and disappear when not. Her eyes tracked the room with the same hypervigilance she'd once used in trauma bays, reading vitals and body language, and the thousands of tiny signals that separated stable from critical. Old habits died hard. Harrison launched into his pitch, something about a development project, international investment, returns that would redefine luxury real estate in Manhattan. His hands moved as he talked, confident and commanding, the gestures of a man who'd never been told no. Emma's phone buzzed again in her pocket. She ignored it. Marcus Harrison smiled at his guests, his teeth white and straight and perfect, And Emma Martinez poured water and thought about the medical alert bracelet warm against her skin, and wondered how many more nights she could do this before the past finally swallowed her whole. The evening was just beginning, and Marcus Harrison had no idea what was coming. Marcus Harrison snapped his fingers without looking up from his phone. The sound cut through the private dining room like a gunshot. Emma's jaw tightened, but she moved forward smoothly, pitcher in hand. Water, no ice. He still didn't look at her. And tell whoever's managing the temperature in here that it's unacceptable. I want it cooler. Yes, sir. Emma refilled his glass, her hands steady despite the familiar rage beneath her sternum. 3 years of finger snaps and orders delivered to the air above her head, as if she were a voice assistant. Harrison set down his phone and looked at his guests. Now, where were we? The Crown Towers project. The woman, Ms. Chen, leaned forward. Her Cartier watch caught the light. Mr. Harrison, before we discuss specifics, perhaps we should order. Fine. Harrison waved toward Emma. You, bring menus. And the wine list. The extended list. Emma nodded, already moving. Behind her, she heard the German investor clear his throat. I must say, Marcus, the vermilion rose is quite elegant. It's convenient, Harrison interrupted. Close to my office. The staff knows how to be discreet. Emma retrieved the leather-bound menus from the hostess stand. Discreet. That was one word for it. Invisible was more accurate. When she returned, the conversation had shifted to numbers. Big numbers. 850 million over 5 years, Harrison was saying. 2 towers, 68 floors each. Prime West Side real estate. Views that will command 50 million per penthouse. The third investor, Sheikh Rashid, set down his water glass carefully. Impressive figures, Mr. Harrison. But what assurances do we have regarding environmental compliance? Harrison's smile was sharp. Sheikh Rashid, Harrison Capital has never had a single violation. Our legal team is the best money can buy. Emma placed menus in front of each guest, silent and precise. Approach from the left, place from the right. Never make eye contact unless addressed. I'll give you a moment to review, she murmured. No need. Harrison didn't open his menu. Lobster Thermidor. Tell Laurent extra tarragon. Light on the cream. And bring the Chateau Margaux 2010. Ms. Chen raised an eyebrow. The 2010 Margaux. That's $4,000, yes. Harrison's smile widened. Consider it a gesture of good faith. Tonight we're celebrating a partnership that will reshape Manhattan's skyline. Emma wrote down the order. She used to write different orders, medical orders that saved lives. Now she wrote cream sauce preferences. For you, Ms. Chen? Emma asked quietly. Dover sole, simply prepared. Ms. Chen's eyes actually met Emma's. There was something assessing in that gaze. And sparkling water. Herr Schmidt ordered duck confit. Sheikh Rashid requested lamb. Halal preparation, he specified. Excellent choices, Emma said, collecting the menus. As she turned, Harrison's voice stopped her. And you, whatever your name is, make sure Laurent understands about the lobster. I don't want it swimming in sauce. If he can't follow simple instructions, there are a dozen other chefs who can. Emma's grip tightened on the menus. Of course, Mr. Harrison. She escaped into the hallway, heart hammering. Behind the door, Harrison's confident voice continued, painting pictures of gleaming towers and investment returns. In the kitchen, she found Laurent at the fish station. VIP order, she said, handing him the ticket. Lobster Thermidor for Harrison. He wants extra tarragon, light cream. I know. Laurent's French accent thickened with irritation. The man thinks he's a master chef. Does he know I trained at Le Bernardin? He doesn't think about you at all, Emma said quietly. None of us exist to him beyond our functions. Laurent paused. You say that like you've met him before. Emma's hand went to Jake's bracelet. I serve him 3 times a week. She didn't mention the other meeting. 3 years ago in a hospital conference room, when Marcus Harrison had slid an envelope across the table. $500,000. All she had to do was adjust her report on the accident. Say Jake had been drunk. Say anything except the truth, that Harrison's driver had been speeding, intoxicated. She'd refused. 2 weeks later, the medical board received anonymous evidence of prescription fraud. Forged documents, deep-faked security footage, testimony from paid witnesses. Emma Martinez, youngest trauma surgeon at Mount Sinai, became Emma Martinez, unemployable and broken. Emma? Laurent's voice pulled her back. You okay? She forced her breathing steady. Long night. It's 8:30. Exactly. The wine steward appeared with the Chateau Margaux, cradling it carefully. $4,000 of grapes, he muttered, and he'll drain it in 40 minutes. Emma carried the wine back on a silver tray. Inside, the conversation had intensified. Track record speaks for itself, Harrison was saying. 43 developments in 12 years. Every single one delivered on time, under budget. Impressive, Ms. Chen agreed. Her tablet glowed with spreadsheets. Though I noticed there was a lawsuit in 2019. Construction violations? Harrison's smile didn't waver. Settled. Nuisance suit. Emma poured the wine, starting with Ms. Chen and working around the table. The Margaux was the color of garnets. When she reached Harrison, he didn't acknowledge her, didn't pause in his pitch. What Ms. Chen means, Schmidt interjected, is that we do extensive research before committing capital. That lawsuit involved subcontractors claiming non-payment, and they were paid, Harrison said smoothly, after they agreed to my terms. Sheikh Rashid set down his glass. Mr. Harrison, in my culture, we say, a man's character is revealed in how he treats those who can do nothing for him. How do you treat your employees? The room went quiet. Harrison laughed. Sheikh, I employ 300 people. Excellent salaries, comprehensive benefits. I believe in rewarding competence. His eyes flicked to Emma by the wall. And I believe in knowing one's place, he added. Everyone has a role. Success means accepting that role and executing it flawlessly. Isn't that right, Waitress? Emma's nails dug into her palm. Yes, sir. See? Harrison spread his hands. Efficiency. Understanding. This is how successful organizations function. Ms. Chen's eyes lingered on Emma. Curiosity? Recognition? Your first course will be out shortly, Emma murmured, and left. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, breathing shallow. Through the door, Harrison's voice continued its relentless march, building visions of wealth on the backs of invisible people. People like her. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Have you thought about the paralegal program? You can't serve tables forever, mija. Emma deleted it. She couldn't go backward. Couldn't be Dr. Martinez again, because that person had been erased. All she could do was survive. One shift at a time. One finger snap at a time. One interaction at a time with the man who'd murdered her brother, destroyed her life, and didn't even remember her face. Inside, crystal clinked as Harrison raised his glass in a toast. Emma straightened her uniform, touched Jake's bracelet, and went back to being no one. The evening was just beginning. The first course arrived on bone china plates, arranged with the precision of architectural drawings. Emma carried the Dover sole to Ms. Chen, the duck confit to Herr Schmidt, the lamb to Sheikh Rashid. She saved Harrison's lobster for last. Lobster thermidor, Mr. Harrison, she said quietly, setting the plate before him. He didn't look up from the document Schmidt had spread across the table. Blueprints, she realized, of the proposed towers. About time. Emma's hand hovered near the plate. Sir, I should mention, I didn't ask for commentary. Harrison cut a piece of lobster, still studying the blueprints. I asked for food. That's what you do, isn't it? Bring food? Ms. Chen glanced up from her tablet, her expression unreadable. Emma stepped back to the wall, her heart rate elevated. She'd seen the kitchen ticket. She'd watched Laurent prepare the dish. Lobster. Shellfish. The same shellfish that... But how would she know about his allergy? She was just a waitress, just invisible staff who poured water and brought plates and existed only as a function. Now, Harrison continued, fork halfway to his mouth, as you can see from these renderings, the Crown Towers will dominate the West Side skyline. Each residence will feature floor-to-ceiling windows, smart home technology, and... He took a bite. Emma's hands clenched at her sides. She counted heartbeats. Medical training died hard. She knew the timeline of anaphylaxis, knew how fast immunoglobulin E could trigger a cascade of histamine, knew that severe reactions could begin in seconds, 10 seconds, 15, 20. Harrison swallowed, reached for his wine. The penthouses alone will generate $300 million in revenue. His hand stopped mid-air. 25 seconds. Marcus? Schmidt leaned forward. Are you all right? Harrison touched his throat. His eyes widened slightly. The first genuine expression Emma had seen cross his face all evening. His voice came out hoarse. Something's... 30 seconds. His face was flushing red, angry welts rising along his jawline like a map of capillaries gone haywire. His breathing turned ragged, a wheeze building in his chest that Emma recognized from 1,000 ER shifts. "Call 911!" Sheikh Rashid stood abruptly, his chair scraping against hardwood. Ms. Chen had her phone out, fingers already dialing, her calm demeanor cracking. "He's having some kind of reaction." "Allergic," Emma heard herself say. The word came out automatic, clinical. Anaphylactic shock. Shellfish. Harrison clawed at his collar, his $2,000 tie suddenly a noose. The wheeze became a whistle, then a desperate gasp. His lips were swelling, his airway closing in real time. He looked at Emma, really looked at her. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus Harrison saw her. His eyes held terror and confusion and the dawning realization that he was dying. Emma stood frozen against the wall. Her medical training screamed at her. Airway, breathing, circulation. The ABCs drilled into her until they were instinct. She knew exactly what to do. Knew she had maybe 2 minutes before his throat closed completely. Knew that without epinephrine, without intervention, Marcus Harrison would die on the floor of the Vermilion Rose. The man who killed Jake, the man who destroyed her career, the man who'd called her just a waitress 90 seconds ago. "Someone help him." Schmidt's German composure shattered. "Please." Harrison fell from his chair, crashing to the floor. His body convulsed, hands grasping at nothing, at air that wouldn't come. The whistling stopped. No sound at all now, just silent suffocation. 30 seconds left, maybe 45 if he was lucky. Emma's hand found Jake's bracelet. She remembered her brother's last voicemail, the one she'd been too busy to answer because she was in surgery saving someone else's life. There's a car." Then static. Then nothing. She remembered the hospital conference room, Harrison's smile, the envelope full of money that was supposed to buy her silence. She remembered the medical board hearing, the forged evidence, the way her colleagues wouldn't meet her eyes. She remembered signing away her license, packing up her apartment, learning to be invisible. Harrison's face was purple now, his eyes rolling back. "The ambulance is coming," Ms. Chen's voice cracked. "They said 5 minutes." He didn't have 5 minutes. Emma closed her eyes. She saw Jake, 22 years old, laughing at some stupid joke, his whole life ahead of him. She saw her white coat hanging in her old locker at Mount Sinai. She saw herself 3 years ago, before the world broke her. "I was a doctor," she thought. "Before everything else, I was a doctor." Her eyes snapped open. "Move!" The word came out sharp, commanding, a voice she hadn't used in 3 years. She was across the room before anyone could react, dropping to her knees beside Harrison's convulsing body. Her hands went to his throat, fingers pressing against his carotid, pulse thready and rapid, maybe 30 seconds of consciousness left. "Kitchen!" she shouted toward the door. "I need an EpiPen. Check the first aid station. Now!" Sheikh Rashid stared at her. "What are you—" "He's in anaphylactic shock. His airway is closing. Without epinephrine in the next 60 seconds he dies." Emma tilted Harrison's head back, opening his airway as much as possible. "Someone get that EpiPen, or we're doing a cricothyrotomy with a steak knife." Ms. Chen ran for the door. Emma's hands moved on autopilot, checking his pulse again, monitoring his breathing, positioning him for recovery if they could stop the reaction. 3 years away from medicine, and her body remembered everything. Harrison's eyes found hers. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, but she saw the question in them. "Who are you?" "Stay with me," she said quietly, her voice dropping to the tone she used to use with trauma patients. "Help is coming. Just stay with me." His hand grasped weakly at her arm. The door burst open. Ms. Chen rushed in with Laurent, who held the restaurant's emergency medical kit. Emma ripped it open, found the EpiPen, tore off the safety cap with her teeth. "This is going to hurt," she told Harrison, and drove the needle into his thigh. She held it for 10 seconds, the full dose, then pulled it away. Her other hand stayed on his carotid, counting heartbeats, waiting for the epinephrine to work its chemical magic. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Harrison gasped. A horrible rattling sound, but it was air. Air moving past swollen tissue, forcing its way in. "There," Emma breathed. "Come on. Breathe." Another gasp. Another. His color started shifting from purple to red, to something almost normal. The room was silent, except for Harrison's desperate breathing and the distant sound of sirens. Emma kept her fingers on his pulse, kept monitoring, kept being what she'd trained 8 years to become. Sheikh Rashid's voice broke the silence, quiet and wondering. "You are not just a waitress." Emma didn't look up. "No. Who are you?" Harrison's eyes were still locked on her face. Even through the fog of near death, even through the adrenaline and terror, she saw the moment recognition finally clicked into place. His lips moved, forming words his swollen throat couldn't quite produce. "Dr. Martinez." Emma's expression didn't change. "Hello, Mr. Harrison." The sirens were getting closer. The paramedics burst through the door 4 minutes later. 2 men in Navy uniforms carrying equipment that Emma recognized intimately. Oxygen tanks, cardiac monitors, the familiar organized chaos of emergency medicine. "We've got a 52-year-old male, anaphylactic reaction to shellfish," Emma said before they could ask, her voice steady and clinical. "Initial presentation at approximately 8:47 p.m. Administered 0.3 milligrams epinephrine intramuscular at 8:49. Patient is responsive. Airway partially compromised but improving. Pulse 120 and stabilizing." The lead paramedic, Rodriguez, according to his name tag, stared at her. "You administered the epi?" "Yes." "Are you a doctor?" Emma's hands were still on Harrison's wrist, monitoring his pulse. "I was." Rodriguez didn't ask for clarification. He dropped to his knees beside her, pulling out a stethoscope. "Okay, Doc. We've got him. You did good." Emma released Harrison's wrist and stood, her legs unsteady. Her uniform was wrinkled. There was a smudge of something on her apron, and her hands that hadn't done real medical work in 3 years, were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. The second paramedic set up the oxygen mask over Harrison's face. Harrison's eyes tracked Emma as she stepped back, his gaze intense and focused, despite the swelling that still distorted his features. "Ma'am, can you come with us?" Rodriguez asked Emma. "The ER docs will want your statement on treatment timeline." Emma glanced toward the door, toward escape, toward the invisible life she'd built. "Please." Rodriguez's voice softened. "You saved his life. Help us keep him alive." Herr Schmidt cleared his throat. He'd been silent through the entire emergency, but now he stepped forward, his expression grave. "Before anyone goes anywhere, I have questions." Ms. Chen closed her tablet with a decisive click. "As do I." Sheikh Rashid looked between Emma and Harrison. His eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Indeed, this evening has become most illuminating." Rodriguez secured the oxygen mask and began taking Harrison's blood pressure. "Questions can wait. We need to transport." "One question cannot wait." Schmidt's German accent grew sharper. He looked directly at Emma. "You said you were a doctor. Past tense. Why past tense?" Emma's hand found Jake's bracelet. "It's complicated." "I suspect, Ms. Chen said quietly, her eyes on Harrison's pale face, "that it involves our host." The room went very still. Harrison tried to sit up. Rodriguez pushed him gently back down. "Sir, you need to stay calm. Your throat is still compromised." But Harrison's eyes were locked on Emma, and in them she saw something she'd never expected to see from Marcus Harrison. Fear. Not fear of death. That had passed. Fear of something else entirely. Fear of consequences. "We need to move him," Rodriguez said, unfolding a collapsible gurney. "Miss, Doctor, whoever you are, you coming or not?" Emma opened her mouth to refuse, to slip back into invisibility, to let this moment pass and return to being no one. Then she saw it. On the table, forgotten in the chaos, Ms. Chen's tablet screen still glowed, and on that screen, clearly visible, was a Google search result. The search bar read, "Emma Martinez, Doctor Malpractice." Ms. Chen followed Emma's gaze. Their eyes met. "I started searching the moment you gave those orders," Ms. Chen said, her voice neutral. "You moved like someone with training, spoke like someone with authority. I wanted to know who you really were. And," Emma's voice came out steadier than she felt, "and I found a very interesting story." Ms. Chen picked up her tablet, scrolled. "Dr. Emma Martinez, former trauma surgeon at Mount Sinai Hospital. Lost her medical license 3 years ago after allegations of prescription fraud and drug trafficking." She paused. "Allegations that were never formally proven." Charges that were mysteriously dropped after you agreed to surrender your license. Schmidt stepped closer to the tablet, reading over Miss Chen's shoulder. It says here the primary witness recanted 2 years later, said he was paid to testify. By whom? Sheikh Rashid asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. All 3 investors turned to look at Harrison. The paramedics had him on the gurney now, strapped in and ready for transport. Harrison's hand shot out, grabbing Rodriguez's sleeve. He pulled the oxygen mask down with his other hand. "Don't!" he rasped, his voice barely functional. "Don't! Sir, you shouldn't talk. Not what you think." Each word cost him, his throat still swollen, but desperation pushed them out anyway. Emma laughed. It was a harsh sound, brittle and sharp. "Not what they think? Really? That's what you're going with?" "Miss Chen," Schmidt said slowly, still reading the tablet. "Scroll down. There's more here. A traffic accident. A fatality. Jake Martinez, age 22. He looked up at Emma. "Your brother?" Emma's jaw clenched. "Yes. The accident involved a vehicle registered to Harrison Capital." Schmidt's voice dropped. "The driver was never charged. He was drunk," Emma said flatly, "going 60 in a 35 zone. Ran a red light on Lexington Avenue. My brother died on impact, and Marcus Harrison offered me $500,000 to change my medical report, to say Jake was intoxicated, to say it was his fault." The private dining room had gone silent, except for the beep of the cardiac monitor attached to Harrison's gurney. "I refused," Emma continued. 2 weeks later, I was under investigation. 1 month after that, I lost my license. 3 months after that, I was working here, serving water to the man who murdered my brother and destroyed my career. Harrison shook his head violently, reaching for the oxygen mask again. Rodriguez held him down. "Sir, you're going to hurt yourself." "She's lying," Harrison wheezed. "Is she?" Sheikh Rashid's voice was cold. "Miss Chen, your tablet. Search for lawsuits involving Harrison Capital, employment disputes, witness intimidation." Miss Chen's fingers flew across the screen. Her expression darkened with each scroll. 7 lawsuits in the past 5 years, all settled out of court, all involving accusations of... She stopped, looked at Harrison with disgust. "All involving accusations of witness tampering and evidence fabrication." Schmidt pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my legal team. Before we invest $850 million, we need to know exactly who we're partnering with." "As am I," Sheikh Rashid said, his hand already on his phone. "In my country, honor is everything. I will not associate with a man who destroys lives to protect his interests." "Wait," Harrison tried to sit up again. "The deal, you can't." "The deal," Ms. Chen said, her voice ice, "is dead." She stood, smoothing her designer suit, and looked at Emma with something like respect. "Dr. Martinez, you saved the life of a man who destroyed yours. That takes either tremendous compassion or tremendous character. Perhaps both." Emma said nothing. She didn't trust her voice. "We're transporting now," Rodriguez announced, releasing the gurney's brake. "Anyone riding with him to Mount Sinai?" None of the investors moved. "I see," Rodriguez said quietly. He glanced at Emma. "Doc?" Emma looked at Harrison, really looked at him. Strapped to a gurney, his face still swollen, his empire crumbling in real time, his carefully constructed power dissolving in the space of 10 minutes. 3 years ago, she would have felt satisfaction, triumph, justice. Now she just felt tired. "I'll follow in my own car," she said. "Someone should brief the ER on his medical history." As the paramedics wheeled Harrison toward the door, he twisted his head to look back at her. His lips moved around the oxygen mask. "Why? Why did you save me?" Emma touched Jake's bracelet. "Because," she said quietly, "I'm a doctor. That's what we do." The gurney disappeared through the door. The sirens faded into the Manhattan night. Emma stood in the private dining room, surrounded by half-eaten food and abandoned wine glasses and 3 billionaire investors who were all staring at her with various expressions of shock and calculation. "Dr. Martinez," Schmidt said finally, "I think we need to have a conversation." "I think," Emma replied, untying her apron with shaking hands, "I need to change out of this uniform first." She walked toward the door, toward the kitchen, toward whatever came next. Behind her she heard Ms. Chen's voice, quiet and thoughtful. "Find out everything about the Jake Martinez case. Everything. And find out who else Harrison has destroyed." The kitchen doors swung closed behind Emma, muffling the conversation. Laurent looked up from his station, his eyes wide. "Emma, what the hell just happened?" Emma pulled off her apron, folded it carefully, set it on the counter. "I stopped being invisible," she said. 3 years earlier, Mount Sinai Hospital, Manhattan, November 3rd, 2021, Dr. Emma Martinez stood in the conference room, still wearing her scrubs from a 12-hour shift. Her hands smelled like antiseptic. There was dried blood on her left shoe. Not hers. Never hers. She'd just finished a successful surgery on a motorcycle accident victim. 26 years old, shattered femur. He'd walk again. She loved her job. Across the table sat Marcus Harrison in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, his lawyer beside him, a sharp-faced woman with a briefcase that probably cost more than Emma's car. "Dr. Martinez," Harrison began, his voice smooth. "Thank you for meeting with us. You said it was about the accident report." Emma's eyes were gritty from exhaustion. "The one from last week, Jake Martinez." Saying her brother's name out loud still felt like swallowing glass. Harrison nodded gravely. "A terrible tragedy. I want to express my deepest condolences. When I heard that my driver's vehicle was involved—" "Your drunk driver," Emma corrected. Her voice stayed level, clinical. "Blood alcohol level .16, twice the legal limit. The toxicology report was very clear." The lawyer, Thornton, her nameplate read, opened her briefcase. "Dr. Martinez, my client is prepared to offer compensation for your family's loss." She slid an envelope across the table. Emma didn't touch it. "Compensation? $500,000, Harrison said. "In bearer bonds, untraceable, no taxes. It's yours immediately." "In exchange for what?" Harrison leaned forward, his expression sympathetic. Practiced, Emma would realize later. Perfected over dozens of similar conversations. "Your brother's toxicology report shows he'd been drinking that night. He had 1 beer, .02, barely measurable." "But measurable," Thornton interjected smoothly. "Which means there's room for interpretation in the accident report. If the investigating officer understood that both parties had been drinking—" "No." Emma stood up. "Absolutely not. Dr. Martinez, please." Harrison's voice hardened slightly. "Be reasonable. Your brother is gone. Nothing will bring him back. But this money could change your life. Pay off your student loans. Buy a house. Secure your future. My brother died because your driver was drunk and speeding. The evidence is clear. I'm not changing anything." "Not changing," Thornton said carefully, clarifying. "There's a difference between .02 and .08. Easy for labs to misread decimal points." Emma stared at them. "You want me to falsify a medical report?" "We want you to correct an error," Harrison said. "There is no error." Harrison's sympathetic expression evaporated. His eyes went cold, the eyes of a man used to getting what he wanted, one way or another. "Dr. Martinez, I've built my career on understanding leverage. Right now, I'm offering you the carrot. Don't make me use the stick. Is that a threat? It's a reality check." Harrison stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "You're 29 years old. You have student loan debt in the 6 figures. You work 80-hour weeks for a salary that barely covers your expenses. And you just lost your only family member." Each word was calculated, precise. Emma's hands clenched at her sides. "I'm offering you a way out," Harrison continued. "A fresh start. All you have to do is acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, your judgment about your own brother's toxicology wasn't entirely objective. Get out," Emma said quietly. "Dr. Martinez, get out of this hospital before I call security." Harrison studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a cold, predatory expression that Emma would see in nightmares for years afterward. "I gave you a chance," he said. "Remember that." He left, Thornton following with her briefcase full of blood money. Emma sank into her chair, shaking with rage and grief and exhaustion. She should have known better, should have seen it coming. Men like Harrison didn't accumulate billions by accepting responsibility. She picked up the envelope he'd left behind, tore it open. Inside were bearer bonds, real ones, negotiable, worth exactly what he'd promised. Emma fed them into the conference room shredder, one by one. 2 weeks later, the medical board received an anonymous complaint about her prescribing practices. Mount Sinai Hospital, November 18th, 2021. The investigation started quietly. A few questions from hospital administration. A review of her prescription records. Nothing alarming at first. Then the FBI arrived. "Dr. Martinez, we need to talk about these." Special Agent Morrison spread photographs across the table. Security camera footage showing Emma in the hospital parking lot, apparently accepting a manila envelope from a man in a hoodie. Another photo of her in a pharmacy, allegedly dropping off fraudulent prescriptions. "That's not me," Emma said immediately. "The facial recognition software says otherwise." "Then your software is wrong. I've never seen this person. I've never written fraudulent prescriptions." Morrison opened a folder. "We have testimony from 3 witnesses, all saying you approached them about selling oxycodone, all saying you offered them deals, prescriptions for cash." "That's impossible. Who are these witnesses?" "I can't disclose that during an active investigation." Emma's hands were shaking now. "This is insane. Check my financial records. If I was selling drugs, where's the money? Offshore accounts are easy to hide, Dr. Martinez." "I don't have offshore accounts." But she was shouting at people who'd already made up their minds. The evidence was there. Photographs, testimony, prescription records that had somehow been altered to show her signature on medications she'd never prescribed to patients she'd never treated. The medical board suspended her license pending investigation. Mount Sinai placed her on immediate leave. Her colleagues stopped returning her calls. Emma's apartment. December 2021. Emma sat on her couch surrounded by legal documents, her savings evaporating into attorney fees. Her lawyer, a public defender who looked barely older than her, was blunt about her chances. "The evidence is compelling, Dr. Martinez. Fabricated maybe, but compelling. Unless you can prove who fabricated it, the board will revoke your license. It was Marcus Harrison, the man whose driver killed my brother. This all started after I refused his bribe. Can you prove that? No. He's too smart to leave evidence. Then we have a problem." The problem got worse when the witnesses testified. Emma watched from the hearing room as 3 people she'd never met described in detail how she'd approached them, how she'd seemed desperate for money, how she'd offered them deals that sounded too good to be true. They were convincing, polished, obviously coached, and Emma had no way to prove they were lying. Medical Board Hearing, January 15th, 2022. Dr. A. Martinez, in light of the evidence presented, this board has no choice but to revoke your medical license effective immediately. Emma sat motionless, numb. Her entire identity, 8 years of medical school, 3 years of residency, countless hours of studying and training and sacrifice, erased in a single sentence. You have the right to appeal, but I must warn you that the evidence against you is substantial. Outside the hearing room, her lawyer touched her arm sympathetically. "I'm sorry, Emma. For what it's worth, I believe you. But belief doesn't win cases." Emma walked out of the building in a daze. It was snowing, light flurries that melted on contact. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I told you I'd use the stick. You should have taken the carrot. MH. She deleted it. Then she went home and cried for the first time since Jake's funeral. 6 months later, Emma stood outside the Vermilion Rose in a borrowed interview suit, clutching a resume that listed server experience instead of trauma surgeon. The restaurant manager, Charles, barely glanced at her credentials. "You've worked in restaurants before?" "During college. Coffee shop, mainly." "Close enough. When can you start?" "Tomorrow," Emma said, because she needed the money, needed something, anything, to stop the free fall her life had become. "Great. Uniform is black and white. Show up at 4 p.m. for training." That easily, Dr. Emma Martinez became Emma Martinez, waitress. The first week she dropped 2 trays and forgot 3 orders. The second week she learned to be invisible. The third week, Marcus Harrison walked in for dinner, sat at table 12, and didn't recognize her. She served him water. He didn't say thank you. She brought him wine. He snapped his fingers for a refill. She existed in his presence 3 times a week, and he never once looked at her face long enough to see the doctor whose life he'd destroyed. Emma touched Jake's medical bracelet, the only thing she had left of her brother, and learned what it meant to be invisible. Present day the Vermilion Rose, outside the private dining room. Emma stood in the kitchen, her hands finally steady, and looked at Laurent and the other staff members who'd gathered, drawn by the commotion. "What happened in there?" Marco whispered. Emma untied her apron, folded it carefully, and set it on the counter. "The truth," she said simply. After 3 years, the truth finally came out. Through the door, she could hear voices: Schmidt, Chen and Sheikh Rashid making phone calls, their tones sharp and decisive. The sound of Harrison's empire beginning its collapse. Emma Martinez pulled off her uniform for the last time and wondered what came next. Emma changed in the staff locker room, pulling on jeans and a sweater that felt strange after 3 years of uniforms. Her hands moved mechanically, removing the apron, hanging it in her locker, closing the metal door with a final click that sounded like punctuation. When she emerged, the 3 investors were waiting in the hallway. Dr. Martinez. Herr Schmidt stood with military posture, his phone still in hand. My legal team has been very busy in the last 20 minutes. As has mine, Ms. Chen added. Her tablet screen glowed with what looked like financial records. Marcus Harrison is a fascinating case study in corporate malfeasance. Sheikh Rashid's expression was grave. In my country, we have laws about honor, about how a man conducts his business. Mr. Harrison would not survive 1 week under our legal system. Emma leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Why are you telling me this? Because, Schmidt said, we want you to know that justice will be served. We may have come here to invest in Harrison's towers, but we will leave as the instruments of his destruction. Ms. Chen scrolled through her tablet. In the past 45 minutes, I've found 7 cases similar to yours. 7 people whose lives Harrison destroyed when they refused to cooperate with his schemes. A building inspector who wouldn't approve a faulty foundation, fired, blacklisted, lost his house. A journalist who investigated his business practices, sued for libel, bankrupted by legal fees. A former employee who witnessed safety violations, threatened, harassed, forced to move to another state. There's a pattern, Schmidt continued, and patterns can be proven in court. My attorneys are already filing preliminary motions. By morning, Harrison Capital will be under investigation by 3 separate regulatory agencies. Emma's throat felt tight. Why? Why do you care? You're investors. You could just walk away. Because, Sheikh Rashid said quietly, I have a daughter your age. She's a doctor too, a pediatrician in Dubai. If someone tried to destroy her the way Harrison destroyed you, I would want someone to stand up for her. And because, Ms. Chen added, her voice sharp, I don't invest with criminals. Harrison wasted our time, cost us money on flights and hotels and due diligence. I take that personally. Schmidt's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and a thin smile crossed his face. My team just spoke with the witness who recanted his testimony 2 years ago. The one who admitted he was paid to lie about you. He's willing to testify again, this time in a criminal proceeding. Emma's heart hammered. Criminal? Witness tampering, evidence fabrication, and given your brother's death, possibly manslaughter charges if we can prove Harrison knew his driver was intoxicated. Schmidt's eyes were cold. I'm German, Dr. Martinez. We're very thorough when it comes to justice. The door to the private dining room opened. Charles emerged, looking shaken. Dr. Martinez, Emma, the restaurant owner wants to speak with you. Am I fired? Fired? Charles laughed, slightly hysterical. You just saved a man's life in our dining room? The owner wants to give you a medal, or possibly hire you as our medical consultant. He's not entirely clear on the details. Tell him I quit, Emma said. Charles blinked. What? I quit. 3 years was enough. She pushed past him into the private dining room. The table was still set with half-eaten food and abandoned wine glasses. Harrison's lobster sat congealing on bone china, the meal that had triggered everything. Emma picked up Jake's medical bracelet from where it had fallen during the chaos. The metal was still warm. Dr. Martinez, Ms. Chen entered behind her. Before you disappear, I have a question. What will you do now? Emma laughed bitterly. I don't know. I have no medical license, no career, no references except from a restaurant. I'm 28 years old and I'm starting over from nothing. Actually, Schmidt said, appearing in the doorway with his phone, my legal team believes your case for license reinstatement is strong, very strong. With the new testimony and evidence of Harrison's fabrication pattern, the medical board will have to reconsider. That could take years. It could take 6 months, Ms. Chen corrected. If you have the right lawyers, which you will, because I'm hiring them for you. Emma stared. Why would you do that? Because I'm angry, Ms. Chen said simply. And when I'm angry, I solve problems. You're a problem I can solve. Harrison is a problem I can destroy. It's efficient. Sheikh Rashid entered. ending a phone call. My attorneys in New York are filing a civil suit against Harrison Capital on your behalf. We're seeking damages for wrongful termination of your career, emotional distress, and loss of future earnings. Conservative estimate, $15 million. Emma's knees went weak. She sat down heavily in one of the dining chairs. I don't understand why you're helping me. You saved his life, Schmidt said. The man who destroyed you, and you saved him anyway. That's not weakness, Dr. Martinez. That's strength. The world needs more people with that kind of strength. Ms. Chen's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked up with satisfaction. Mount Sinai Hospital's chief of surgery just called me. Apparently news travels fast in medical circles. He wants to meet with you tomorrow morning. Why? Because the hospital that fired you 3 years ago is about to have a very public scandal when it comes out that they terminated an innocent doctor based on fabricated evidence. They're going to want to make amends. Ms. Chen's smile was sharp. Amends usually involve large settlements and job offers. Emma's head was spinning. 20 minutes ago, she'd been a waitress. Now she was sitting in a private dining room while billionaire investors orchestrated the resurrection of her career like it was a business deal. I need air, she said. She walked out through the kitchen, past Laurent, who was explaining the night's chaos to the line cooks, past Marco, who stared at her like she'd grown a second head, out the back entrance into the alley behind the Vermilion Rose. The November air was cold and clean. She could hear traffic on Madison Avenue, the perpetual symphony of Manhattan that never slept. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then, something made her accept the call. Dr. Martinez. The voice was familiar. Dr. Patricia Walsh, chief of surgery at Mount Sinai. I hope I'm not calling too late. It's 10 p.m. on a Friday. I'm used to late calls. I heard about what happened tonight. The investors have been very vocal about events at the Vermilion Rose. Walsh paused. Emma, I owe you an apology. We all do. The board, the administration, everyone who didn't fight harder when you were accused. Emma closed her eyes. Why didn't you fight harder? Because the evidence looked real. Because Harrison's lawyers were threatening lawsuits. Because we took the easy way out instead of standing by one of our best surgeons. Walsh's voice cracked. I'm sorry. That's inadequate, but it's true. What do you want, Dr. Walsh? I want you to come back. Not as a resident, as an attending, trauma surgery, your old department, double your previous salary. And I want to personally sponsor your medical license reinstatement. Emma opened her eyes, staring at the Manhattan skyline. I'll think about it. Please do. We need doctors like you. We always did. The call ended. Emma stood in the alley for a long time, holding Jake's bracelet, feeling the weight of 3 years lifting slowly from her shoulders. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Ms. Chen. Harrison just made bail. $5 million, but he's finished. His investors are pulling out. His projects are frozen. His reputation is destroyed. You won, Dr. Martinez. Emma typed back. It's not about winning. Ms. Chen responded immediately. Then what's it about? Emma thought about Jake, about the operating room, about every life she'd saved, and every patient she'd lost, and every moment she'd spent becoming someone who could make impossible decisions in the space between heartbeats. She typed, it's about being who I'm supposed to be. Inside the Vermilion Rose, she could hear voices, Schmidt, Chen, and Sheikh Rashid still making calls, still dismantling Harrison's empire with the systematic efficiency of people who'd built their own fortunes by being smarter and more ruthless than their competition. Emma Martinez straightened her shoulders, touched her brother's bracelet one last time, and walked back inside. Not as a waitress, as a doctor. 18 months later, Mount Sinai Hospital, Manhattan, May 2026. Doctor. Emma Martinez stood in the trauma bay, her hands steady inside a patient's chest cavity. Gunshot wound to the thorax. 19 years old, bleeding out fast. Clamp, she said calmly. Her resident, Dr. Sarah Kim, nervous and brilliant, handed it over with shaking hands. Breathe, Kim, Emma murmured, not looking away from the surgical field. You've got this. Find the bleeder. There, the subclavian artery. Good. Now clamp it. Smooth motion. Don't hesitate. Kim's hands steadied. The clamp closed. The bleeding stopped. Perfect, Emma said. Now let's repair it and get this kid to recovery. 20 minutes later, the patient was stable. Kim pulled off her surgical mask, exhausted and exhilarated. "Dr. Martinez, I almost lost it. My hands were shaking." "But you didn't lose it. You found the bleeder and you saved his life." Emma stripped off her gloves. "First thoracic gunshot?" "Yes. Won't be your last. Go right up the surgery." "And Kim?" "Yes? You did good work tonight." Kim's face lit up. Emma watched her hurry toward the residence lounge and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. Emma's office was small but functional. Desk, computer, walls covered with medical journals, and a single framed photo of Jake, young and smiling, taken a week before the accident. His medical bracelet sat in a shadow box beside it. She was reviewing patient charts when her phone buzzed. Text from Ms. Chen. "Verdict is in. Check the news." Emma opened her laptop and navigated to the New York Times homepage. The headline read, "Real estate mogul Marcus Harrison sentenced to 22 years in federal prison." She clicked through, scanning the article. Witness tampering, evidence fabrication, 7 counts of fraud. 1 count of vehicular manslaughter. They'd finally proven Harrison knew his driver was intoxicated that night and had ordered him to drive anyway. 22 years. Harrison would be 74 when he got out. His empire, Harrison Capital, had been dissolved. Assets liquidated to pay settlements to his victims, including Emma, who'd received $8 million in damages. She'd donated half of it to a scholarship fund in Jake's name. The other half sat in an account she barely touched, because it turned out she didn't need much money to be happy. She needed an operating room and patients to save and residents to teach. She needed to be a doctor. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Dr. Patricia Walsh entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Heard you had a thoracic GSW. How'd Kim do?" She was nervous but solid. "She'll be a good trauma surgeon." Walsh handed Emma a coffee. "Like someone else I knew." "How are you settling in as director of trauma surgery?" Emma still wasn't used to the title. 6 months ago, Mount Sinai had promoted her, offering a formal apology and a position that came with actual power, hiring decisions, department budget, the ability to shape how the next generation of surgeons trained. "It's strange," Emma admitted. 3 years ago, I was serving water. Now I'm running a department. 3 years ago, you were surviving," Walsh corrected. "Now you're thriving. There's a difference." Emma sipped her coffee. "Have you seen the Harrison verdict?" "Everyone's seen it. It's national news." Walsh sat down across from Emma's desk. "How do you feel?" "Honestly, empty. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, vindication, something. But mostly I just feel tired. That's normal. Revenge isn't as satisfying as people think." Walsh paused. "Though, speaking of satisfaction, I heard the Jake Martinez Memorial Scholarship just accepted its 5th recipient. Pre-med student from the Bronx. Full ride to Columbia." Emma smiled, a real smile this time. Jake would have liked that. He always said education was the way out. He was right. Walsh stood. "I'll let you get back to work. Board meeting tomorrow at 7 a.m. Don't be late." "I'm never late." "I know. It's one of your more annoying qualities." After Walsh left, Emma returned to her charts, but her mind kept drifting to Harrison, not to hatred or anger, but to a strange kind of pity. He'd had everything: money, power, respect, and he'd thrown it all away because he couldn't accept responsibility for his actions. She wondered if he understood that yet. Probably not. 6 months later, Mount Sinai Hospital, November 2026. Emma was grabbing coffee in the doctor's lounge when she overheard 2 residents talking. "Heard Martinez used to be a waitress?" "No way. Dr. Martinez? She's like the best trauma surgeon here." "I'm serious. My attending told me. She lost her license, worked at some fancy restaurant for 3 years, then came back." "Wild story." Emma cleared her throat. Both residents jumped. "Dr. Martinez, we were just gossiping about my employment history." Emma smiled. "It's fine. It's true. I was a waitress for 3 years at the Vermilion Rose." The residents stared at her like she'd admitted to being a spy. "What happened?" one asked, then immediately looked mortified. "Sorry, that's too personal." "No, it's okay." Emma poured her coffee, considered how much to share. "Someone powerful tried to destroy my career. For a while he succeeded. I lost everything. My license, my savings, my identity. I became invisible. But you came back," the second resident said. "I came back," Emma agreed, "with help from people who believed in me. and with the understanding that being invisible for a while taught me something important. What? That the people we don't see, the waitress, the janitor, the delivery guy, they're not less than us. They're human beings with full, complex lives. They might be doctors or artists or geniuses who've had bad luck. We need to see them, acknowledge them, treat them with respect. The residents nodded thoughtfully. Emma's pager buzzed. Trauma incoming. You two coming or what? They scrambled after her. The Vermilion rose. December 2026. Emma walked into the restaurant for the first time in 18 months. Charles spotted her immediately. Emma, Dr. Martinez. He rushed over, beaming. We heard about your promotion, Director of Trauma Surgery. We're so proud. Thanks, Charles. She looked around the dining room. The crystal chandeliers, the white tablecloths, the carefully arranged silverware. It looked exactly the same. She felt completely different. Table for one? Charles asked. Actually, I'm meeting someone. Ms. Chen appeared at Emma's elbow, immaculate as always. Dr. Martinez, punctual as ever. They sat at a corner table. Not the private dining room. Emma had requested specifically. She never wanted to see that room again. Thank you for meeting me, Ms. Chen said, ordering wine with the efficiency of someone who'd memorized every wine list in Manhattan. I wanted to discuss a proposition. I'm not leaving Mount Sinai. I know. But I'm starting a foundation, providing legal support for people who've been wrongfully accused or targeted by powerful individuals. People like you were 3 years ago. Chen leaned forward. I want you on the board, medical advisor. You'd help us identify cases, provide expert testimony when needed. Paid position, flexible hours. Emma considered. Why me? Because you survived. Because you know what it's like to be destroyed and have to rebuild from nothing. Because you're the face of what we're trying to do. Prove that one person standing up to power can win. A young waitress approached their table, nervous, barely making eye contact. Can I get you anything else? Emma looked at her, really looked at her, saw the exhaustion around her eyes, the careful way she held herself, the practiced invisibility. What's your name? Emma asked gently. The waitress blinked, surprised. Sophia. Hi, Sophia. Thank you for taking care of us tonight. You're doing great work. Sophia's face transformed. Thank you, Dr. Wait, are you Dr. Martinez? The one who used to work here? I was, for 3 years. Best education I ever received. Charles tells stories about you. Says you saved someone's life right here in the restaurant. I did my job, Emma said simply. Just like you're doing yours. Never let anyone tell you your work doesn't matter. I was just a waitress for 3 years. I'll never forget what that taught me. Sophia nodded, her eyes bright, and hurried back to the kitchen. Miss Chen smiled. That's why I want you on the board. I'll think about it, Emma said, but she already knew her answer would be yes. Mount Sinai Hospital. 1 year later, Dr. Emma Martinez stood in the operating room, teaching a new crop of residents, saving lives, building the career that had been stolen and then returned to her. On her wrist, Jake's medical bracelet caught the surgical lights. She thought about Marcus Harrison in his prison cell, about the investors who'd become unlikely allies, about Charles and Laurent and everyone at the Vermilion Rose who'd never known they were working alongside a doctor. She thought about the invisible people everywhere, serving food, cleaning buildings, delivering packages, and made a silent promise to always see them, because she'd been invisible once, and she'd never forget.